Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scary-ish Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, and this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here to chit-chat for probably a really long episode about things.
I mean, it's nice that you folks can see how long this episode is, because we're just starting out recording it. Although I know I have a pretty long script, and Robin has one of the longest scripts I think she's ever had. How many pages do you got?
6.
Yeah, that's long. Hers is long. So it's going to be a fun time, though. I'm going to be covering Stonehenge. Robin, what are you going to be covering?
I'm going to be covering D.B. Cooper.
Right on. I am not sure anything about D.B. Cooper, so it'll be really, really fun to learn. But before we get any further, I just want to give a big shout out to all the folks who put in entries into our contest for the giveaway that we were doing the past month. Everyone that commented a friend's name and shared the episode on any of our social medias got an entry into it. I think the most entries actually went to Glitch Grim. Glitch also shares the episode even when we're not having contests, so shout out to you. However, you were not the victor. The victor was Lunabin over there on Instagram, who is sharing the stories and commenting on just about every episode as well. Thank you so much, Luna. We're going to have this gift package that Robin is curating sent out to you. We're going to reach out to you to get your information that we can send it to. So big shout out to everyone who participated and had entries. We had quite a few of them, but shout out to Luna who won. So right on. Also, if you are hoping to hear some homegrown horrors, those are going to be on the Storytime episodes, which air Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at youtube.com/scaryish and twitch.tv/scaryish podcast. And if you have a homegrown horror you'd like to send in, you can do so to our email address, storytime@scaryish.com, or any of our social medias. The best way to find those is to go to our website, scaryish.com, and it has all of our social media links right there, or you can click contact us on our website and send it that way. So those are the plugs that we usually do at the beginning of the show. I think I'm the one that's going first this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you go, Ger.
Okay, so this week I really wasn't thinking about what topic I wanted to cover. And then last night I dreamt that I was standing in this completely dark room. And it reminded me of the Upside Down when Eleven first goes into it in Stranger Things when it's just empty. And I looked around for what seemed like ages, searching for not just a way out, but literally anything else. And it was complete emptiness. I started to panic, thinking like I would be there alone forever. And then I spun around and there was a door off in the distance. And I started to walk towards it, and it seemed to get further and further away the more I approached it, so I started to run. And at this point, I should have known I was dreaming because I didn't get winded after 6 steps, which is what happens when I'm awake.
Wow.
But I ran, and slowly the door got closer and closer. So this is a super intense dream, right? And finally, I reached the handle of the door running full speed, twisted it, and ran straight through it, and there I was, standing underneath a night sky filled with stars. And I couldn't help but look up, just thrilled to see literally anything, feeling like I had escaped from whatever I was trapped in. And then I looked around and realized I was standing in the middle of what seemed like a circle of rock giants, all looking down on me, judging me. And then I realized that those rock giants were actually just a bunch of fucking rocks. And some standing alone, some in formations with other rocks, and I turned around, and when I did so, I jumped back with a start. And standing right behind me was Robin. But it was Robin with black eyes. And she stared at me, and I asked her, "Are you okay?" And as I began to approach, she spoke. And she said in this deep, unnatural voice that I might edit in or not, "Defeat me." And she started to walk towards me, and it was like this invisible hand was pushing me backwards, and I couldn't stop it. There was nothing I can do. And before I knew it, I was at the edge of this circle of stones, and it felt like it was my last stand. And I thought maybe I had actually stopped the progress of this invisible force, but quickly I realized that whatever this was had just stopped so I could realize my situation. And then Demon Robin smiled, and I was flung backwards, and I was just falling. And suddenly I was back in that dark space again, and falling endlessly. And then my foot finally met something firm and sturdy, and what it was the floor of our bedroom, because I had woken up because Robin had pushed me off the bed for what was probably the 100th time in my life. And I said, fuck it, I'll cover Stonehenge. And that's the story behind why I decided to cover Stonehenge.
That was such a long and unnecessary story.
So first and foremost, I don't know where all that all came from. I just started typing and it all came out. I basically blacked out. And when I came to, that was the paragraph that was on my page. So I was like, I'm going to go with it, whatever.
Are you serious?
No, obviously not. I'm not serious.
Was that your real dream?
No, not at all.
Oh my gosh.
Just came out of my fingertips. Don't know what happened. But hey.
So what a waste of fucking time.
Here we go.
This is going to be a bad episode, I already know.
We're going to talk about Stonehenge. Fuck you, Robin. For those of you who had never heard of Stonehenge before, it's basically a ring of standing stones, some of which are laid across the top of others to form like a rudimentary gateway or door shape, and they're arranged in a circle for the most part. It has been a full circle in the past in some configurations. It currently is not a complete circle. It's like half a circle, while other stones are laid out in various different spots on the incomplete side. But they still kind of form a completing circle, just more like polka dots rather than a straight line.
In that episode of Doctor Who with Matt Smith, are they at Stonehenge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I know exactly which one you're talking about. I didn't reference it in my script at all.
Okay.
But yes, that's where they are. The stones are very tall. On average, they're around 13 feet tall, which is over twice of me stacked on top of myself. But that's not the tallest. In fact, there are stones there that measure up to 30 feet tall, which is very, very tall. And they got that girth too. They average 7 feet wide. So these are giant stones. And the average weight is around 25 tons. And that's, for those of you in the United States, 50,000 pounds, if you did not know that. And in the United States, it's 2,000 pounds to a ton. In England, where this is, it would be around 22,679 kilograms. I really wish we could all get on the metric system so I don't have to do these conversions all the damn time. In fact, I'm pretty sure this magical, mystical place is actually some form of calculator for figuring out conversion rates for all these stupid numbers that we do, but I digress.
That's called an abacus.
Is it? Like, for me, it was called Google. So.
No, I have no idea. Actually, I've never used one.
Wow. I have. Not really.
Really?
I've seen them before.
Oh, I've played with them as a kid, just like tossing the beads back.
Then I've
back
used
and
one
forth.
before.
Okay.
I've never used one in like mathematical
actually
calculations.
Using it to count. Yeah,
yes.
I don't know how those work. If you guys know how to use one, you should let us know, because that's freaking cool.
I guess, maybe. I don't want to learn it, though, but definitely tell us how to do it, and I will be very interested. So, all right. The place is, without a doubt, somewhere I want to go before I die. I think Stonehenge is one of those things that you absolutely have to see. And if you don't know, it is located in a little place called Wiltshire, England. And it should be something that we possibly see in the very near future if our travel plans wind up the way we hope they do in 2020, because we've discussed maybe some Europe stuff. We even talked about it today a little bit. But I'm very excited. It's something I definitely want to check in on if we get there. Now, I think most of us have seen what Stonehenge looks like. So that description is really for those of you who didn't know the dimensions of these things, or if you really have never heard of Stonehenge before. And maybe it's just me, but I realized when I was researching this that there's a whole lot I didn't know about Stonehenge. So some facts are going to come first, either that I did know, or I didn't know, or I just found fascinating. And then we'll get on to some weird stuff. And here's the thing, like, this podcast is called Scarish, right? And we usually try and work some scary stuff into each topic. And I always worry a little bit that if I just go too much like background and history that you guys might get bored. So I'm definitely not going to do that. There's a million things we could talk about with Stonehenge's history. I'm going to talk about some background, and then we're going to get into some stuff that I won't say it's exactly scarish, although there's definitely a scary, I won't say person, there's a scary entity that makes an appearance
Is it a
in one of the stories. You'll see. So let's start out. When I picture Stonehenge, it's always the circle of rocks that springs to mind. Now, what I didn't know is there's this gigantic circular ditch that surrounds the site. It's much larger than the actual site of Stonehenge where the rocks are. And I never really knew that. And when I saw that on the overhead view of a picture of Stonehenge, I was like, oh shit, like, is that something they did recently? Is that something that's been around for a while? And I'm an idiot, because it is, in fact, literally the opposite of that. The ditch, the circle that goes around it, is literally the oldest part about Stonehenge. Before the rocks were there, they dug the ditch. And by they, I mean scientists have figured out that this is what's happened. So they project that it was originally done around 3100 BC. So that would mean it's over 5,000 years old. So that ditch held up really, really well. And it's almost like a perfect circle. So
I love that band.
I knew you were going to say that. And it's a really, really long time ago. 5,000 years is substantially long ago. So it's like however long between us and Jesus is Jesus and then half or 2/3 of Stonehenge. And then when you add those together, that's what you get for us. So it's a really long time ago, right? It's roughly 360 feet in diameter. So that's the circle that Stonehenge sits inside. And it actually has spots where it's not dug out to allow people to enter. So it essentially has two entrances. And if it was a clock, because it almost looks like a perfect circle, like I said, it would be with an entrance at the north, which is around 1:30, so between 1 and 2, and at 6 o'clock. So the rocks do come in later, and there's two types of rocks in Stonehenge. There's blue stones, which are going to be important, and there's sarsen, which I don't know if I'm saying right, but I'm not going to say it again, so who cares? So, maybe one more time. Blue stones are what we know as rocks, while sarsen are also what we know as rocks. And I'm sure I could get a geologist in here to blow your mind with some rock facts and tell you all the differences, but let's focus on the bigger picture here.
So far, your story rocks.
Thank you. That's so nice of you.
Not really.
Now, I hate you. Now, I can get really balls deep into the history of the whole place because there's so much, but let's just hit the high notes, all right? So I mentioned that the ditch is thought to be the first part of the monument, but the site itself has had some stuff going on there for a really, really, really long time, like 8,000 BC, which is literally 10,000 years ago. So whatever time it was before these stones and the ditch was dug, double that, and that's how long things have happened in this particular area in England. And in that time period, 8,000 BC, there were around 5 post holes there, which is exactly what you think they are. They're holes that have been dug out that something was put into.
Okay.
And they were in locations that up until recently, and when I say recently, I mean 2013, they realized, oh wow, like this super ancient site has been like kind of covered over with a car park where people would put their cars when they went to visit Stonehenge.
I like that you say car park because we don't call them car parks out here in America.
I did a lot of history from like the actual site versus like doing stuff from the United States. I did find some stuff from Michigan State University. It was actually really good shit too. And shout out to Wikipedia because although it didn't have the best information, it had the best sources cited that I could go and get this information from. I had so many tabs open my Google Chrome, I thought my computer was going to start on fire. But I imagine like someone was in the lot parking their car in 2013 and noticed something strange about the ground. And then they like officially looked into it and they're like, ooh, shit, we might have put a car park where the most ancient of the ancient site exists. So I think it's been relocated. And you're probably thinking, why? Why were there 5 post holes? Well, it could have been a calendar or it could have been rituals, which seems far more likely.
Because there's 5 post holes. There's 5 points to a star.
They weren't arranged like a star.
Oh, okay.
No, but I appreciate your imagination. And the reason it seems far more likely that it was ritualistic than a calendar is because at the time, and as time went on, Stonehenge had this place of significance. And we're going to kind of get into that because as time starts to progress and people keep going back there, it starts to develop. And once you hit the 3500 to 3100 BC timeline, that's when they dig the ditch. No exact dates on when they dig the ditch, but whoever it was that dug this ditch decided to bury their flint tools plus the bones of deer and oxen in there. And they've determined this through like radiocarbon dating that this stuff is indeed over 5,000 years old that was buried in this ditch. So that's when they're like, we're pretty sure this is around the time that it was dug. And it's funny to me because it's like, whoever did this, when they're done, was like, sweet, like we have this awesome ditch now. And then another person was like, what do we do with it? And the first person was like, I guess we throw our trash into it. And that's what they did. Because that's the human way, trash, apparently. Though. Well, it's like they discarded the things that they used to dig it. And then they also discarded animal bones, which might have been animals that they used to like transport the dirt. Who the hell knows? But that's what they found there. And it's kind of bizarre that they dug this ditch and then started throwing shit in it, but just inside that ring that I described to you are 56 pits, almost equally spaced out around the ring, and they're all around 1 meter, almost exactly in diameter. So they dug more posts. So you might think, why so many holes? Well, the thing that it could have been is what's known as a timber circle, which is essentially you taking gigantic logs and stacking them all in like a concentric circle for who knows why. It could have also been pit. It could have been a giant fire pit where they just come and had like awesome like Burning Man bonfires. And they also think it could have been a bluestone circle, which is important, and I'll tell you why. So in 2013, a few things were learned, which is pretty cool because it's like we didn't know a lot of things for sure about Stonehenge for a very long time, but 2013 was a very big year for it. So there was this dude in 1920 who excavated those 56 holes, right? And when he was pulling stuff out, he basically discarded things he thought to be unimportant. And when I say discarded, he kept it around, but he didn't examine it. It really sounds like he was digging for treasure or some shit.
Treasure.
But after 15 years, so like 1935, they were satisfied with what they found and they put back what they had dug out. So in 2013, someone was like, we should test the shit that guy dug up and replaced. So they did. When they did that, they discovered bone fragments from 63 different individuals that had been buried in the 56 holes.
Wow.
And the thing is, too, is like, it wasn't just like a little bit of bone fragments. They say, and it's a weird number, but they found over 50,000 bone fragments. They're like small, like almost microscopic, which would indicate that these folks were cremated. So it's a cremation burial site that's over 5,000 years old.
So it is like Burning Man.
Yeah, quite literally. Maybe that's where they got the name from. So they radiocarbon dated this stuff, 100% true. It happened around 3000 BC. What's really interesting is that they found this chalk buried deep in the post holes, which was compromised of bone originally, but had been crushed into this really fine powder over time. It wasn't just like the remains that had been burned, it was something else entirely. And what makes it turn into that is weight. It's basically prolonged exposure to an extremely heavy thing on top of it, which makes them think it actually wasn't timber. It was more likely the bluestones, which had apparently been there for over 5,000 years. So remember how I said that bluestones were just rocks? Well, these giant bluestones actually aren't from this area. And this is something I kind of heard about when it started being talked about in the news, was they realized that this particular rock isn't native to the area Stonehenge is in, and it had to have come from somewhere else and been moved there. And after rigorous sciencing, it's been determined that this bluestone that they have at Stonehenge came from a spot in Wales and was moved there. That is 180 miles away. To move giant rock stones that were, at the time, 3 tons. So that's incredibly heavy. You're not just going to strap that to your back and just take it over there. 180 miles, 3 tons, to essentially be used as headstones. So this must have been like a very important person or family or group of people to be buried there. And more on that later, because it is very interesting that they discovered this in 2013, and we're going to get to some of the legends about Stonehenge in a little bit. So the human remains that were found there weren't just confined to that time period either. It starts in around 3100 to 3000 BC, but it continued to be used as a cremation burial site for the next 500 years. So half a millennia, this place was basically an ash graveyard. And it's kind of crazy to think about that, because for 5,000 years before that, people were coming here for unknown reasons, and then for the next 5,000 years, people still came. And to give you an idea, is like what I just talked to you about is pre-Stonehenge, and then like Stonehenge the OG.
Oh my gosh.
Since Stonehenge the old OG, there's been 3 other Stonehenges technically, or arrangement of rocks in this exact location, right? And that's funny because the 3rd iteration, so Stonehenge 3, the Stonehengening, that one actually had 5 separate versions of itself. So there's really been like 10 versions of Stonehenge.
When you say versions of Stonehenge, are they using the same rocks?
No,
and
they're
the
using
rocks
different
around?
rocks.
So what happens to the old rocks?
Eventually they get incorporated, or they just get removed.
Huh.
Yeah, so this is really, really fascinating shit, because it's like the same site being reused for various different things in different formations. And some of these things, when you look at like Stonehenge 2 or Stonehenge 3, it seems like they might align with something like a star calendar or some way of like measuring the stars, you know? Because you hear about that stuff a lot in like ancient societies. And that was definitely a theory for a very long time. But the more studying that's done of it, the more it's starting to disprove that this theory is actually correct, which means what the hell was it actually used for?
Is it possible that it's just like an art installation?
It might be. And that's the thing. You don't really know. You know for sure that it was a burial site for like half a millennia. And before that and after that, you're not exactly sure. They eventually stopped burying people there, but that's all you really know. I mean, it's undoubtedly the site of some form of ritual for thousands of years. Like, you can consider a wedding a ritual if you really wanted to, which would be a pretty sweet-ass place to have a wedding. Or maybe it was like human sacrifices, but it's like nearly impossible to tell aside from speculation. And realistically, like a wedding is basically a human sacrifice because you're giving up your life forever. Up. But well, we can get really deep into the science of the specific group of people who made it and maybe the origins of the rituals they were doing. Let's talk about some of the stories that have surrounded Stonehenge instead, because that's a lot of background. And now we're going to get into 3 specific like legends of where Stonehenge came from. So the first one is fairly straightforward. The area that Stonehenge occupies was obviously once home to giants. And these giants one day were all standing in a circle, holding hands, and they mysteriously turned to stone. And what's funny is,
What?
I saw this story in a lot of places, and I'm like, I need way more details than this. But it's very hard to find details about this version of the story, because there's other versions. And way too often I couldn't find why they turned to stone, which was the detail I really wanted.
Obviously, Gandalf just came by and was like, "You shall not pass." And
My next bullet point later says, I figure they got hit by the sun like in The Hobbit. So that's the thing, though. That's not what happened. Apparently, and I don't know if this is true because I can't confirm it because I don't know any giants, but they were turned to stone because they were, and I'm not shitting you, I found this on the internet, so it's got to be true, dancing on a Sunday. And because they danced on a Sunday, they were turned to stone. Now,
what is this? The laws of Chick-fil-A?
now, I'm not sure if this is true or not. It sounds fairly reasonable to me. Chick-fil-A exists. But if this is the case, I'm pretty sure the curse of dancing on a Sunday can be broken by Kevin Bacon.
Aww.
Yes, that is a Footloose joke.
What's funny is I just watched The Darkness yesterday.
The movie with Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than Footloose. Now, probably the most famous story about Stonehenge can be originated from a guy named Geoffrey of Monmouth. He wrote this book in 1136-ish. Might be like give or take a few years. But the book is called The History of the Kings of Britain. And for like 400 years, this book was treated and considered to be a historical accounting and not fiction. Spoilers, it's fiction. But for a long time, 400 years, people are like, oh yeah, like, did you study your history last night? Sure did. What'd you learn about Uther Pendragon? And so we're going to get into the story about Stonehenge that involves...
If you guys don't know who Uther Pendragon is, you gotta pick up a book. Sword
you
in the
should
Stone.
pick up this book because this shit is so fascinating that people thought this was actually what happened for a very long time. Like, I went and like found this book, and one of the first pictures that they show me that's in the book is like, here's the king standing next to his 2 pet dragons. And I was like, how fucking stupid were people back then?
Come on, Jeff.
It's like he basically wrote Game of Thrones, but he wrote it as like a history book. And I'm pretty impressed with how much dedication people had to like deciding to believe that this was true. But in this incredibly
to believe.
They did. They had their posters out and everything. But in this incredibly detailed work, which it is, it's amazing. The breakdown of the story is essentially this involving Stonehenge. In the year 400 AD, which would be 700 years before the book was written, there was a big battle where a bunch of British knights and nobles died. And the king decided he was going to bury these folks on the Salisbury Plain, known obviously for its delicious steaks. And the king, who at the time was Aurelius Ambrosius, which I'm pretty sure I said that right, decided he wanted to build a monument to honor some of these fallen men, probably all of them, at the site he was going to bury them. For reference, the king's brother was Uther, who would eventually get the name Uther Pendragon when he became king. There's this whole thing about how when Aurelius died, this comet showed up in the sky that looked like a dragon, and it was like a sign that Uther was going to take over and things were going to be fine. That's where he got his name from when he became the king. Doesn't matter. So, this monument was going to be in England, the Salisbury Plain. Side note, that is a real area, and guess what resides on it today? Stonehenge.
Wow.
So, I mean, Stonehenge has been there this whole time, and it's been named that for this entire time, so it's not that crazy of a coincidence. But the king and his brother hung out with this dude that you've probably heard of named Merlin. And Merlin hears the king talking. This is history, according to these fucking people, for 400 years,
oh
man.
My! Is there a sword in a stone in there?
I mean, I'm sure that's part of this history book, but I didn't get there because it doesn't involve this particular site of Stonehenge.
I'm just thinking of that Merlin show now. It's so good.
And honestly, if you were to like somehow take your like handheld device back and show people in the 1100s and be like, "This is what happened. My magical recording device got it all," they'd be like, "This witch has the history of our people right there." And it'd be terrible acting and just terrible storylines.
What? The acting is good in that show.
Show sucks.
Oh,
I barely ever watched it. It's just been in the background. I just want to make you mad. All right. If any Merlin fans are out there like writing me hate mail, save it. So Merlin hears the king talking about building this monument, and Merlin tells him, yo dog, if you want this place to be the shit, you gotta make it look just like Giant's Ring in Ireland. That place is amazing. But he elaborated. He didn't just leave it at that. He was like, I mean, just like it. You gotta go get the stones from Mount Killaroost. I think that's how you say it. Take the stones from there. They're like really big. No one can lift them, man. No one. And you gotta bring them back here. And if you do that, only someone with, quote, combined great skill and artistry could set them up exactly how they were laid out way over there. But if we could do that, it would be toit forever. Which is to say, he told him, you got to go get these stones if you want your monument to last forever, and you need to make it look just like it looks in Ireland. And I really feel like this was this guy's way of making up an excuse for why England went to war with Ireland.
Oh, my goodness.
Because everyone hears about this in the story, and Merlin is basically like, y'all can't pull it off. And they're like, bet. So
Oh, my God.
they start a war to get these fucking magical rocks. Because there's no better way to honor the dead than to toss more of your loyal soldiers into the meat grinder and kill a bunch of other soldiers from another place along the way. So the king picks, of course, his brother, Uther, who's like, thanks. And then 15,000 other men and is like, go get the stones. Like he's Thanos or some shit. So they go to Ireland and they fight a bunch of people, and a bunch of people die. But eventually they get to the Giant's Ring on this mountain. And they try and take it down, but these stones are really, really heavy. And Merlin pops back up and says, I told you no one can lift these things. So the soldiers and Uther are like, Jesus Christ, which is just like my Monty Python phase from high school kicking back up a little bit in my script.
Okay.
And then I'm sure coconuts played into this part where they like ran around. But here's the thing about Merlin in this story is he makes all these weird brags on shit that he says so he can later solve those problems. Because he always knew he was the only one strong enough to lift these fucking rocks. Like, no one else is going to get it. He has to magic these rocks up. So he shows up, he's like, told you no one's strong enough to lift it. And then he shows up and lifts them. And all the soldiers are like, dang, he's good. Like, he's starting his own brand of hero worship by telling people, like, no one can do this. And the word spreads, and he shows up, he's like, oh, I did it. Look at that. It's just like, it's a real dick move, but it works out really well for him. So, and he probably puts on, like, some cool shades right after he takes down the giant circle and packs it up to be transported.
Oh, my gosh. I have shades in mine, too.
I'm glad. So they get them back to England. They probably floated them down the mountain on a river of blood that they spilled from innocent people to get them. But they get them back to the spot the king wants them on Salisbury Steak Mountain or whatever. And the king...
How many times are you going to bring up Salisbury Steak?
I really want a Locomoco.
I really want a Locomoco, too.
But the king wants his monument, and Merlin just sits back, and I'm like, shades, lawn chair, like probably sipping a martini, and he's watching these fucking idiots try and construct this thing. And you got to remember, he said, only someone with a combination of great skill and artistry could reassemble this giant circle. And so he's just so pleased with himself watching these people try and do it and fail. So after they fail for a while, the king tells Merlin, just do it. And that is the true origin of the Nike slogan.
You've said
Not
that
really.
in like 4 different episodes.
I've said that in one different episode, and it was the truth. Bonus points if you remember which episode. So Merlin rubs his hands together, puts some magic on those stones, and rearranges them exactly how they were in the Giant's Ring. And he tells everyone, I guess I have amazing skill and artistry, because he said that that's what it would take to do that, which he plays off as this lesson he was trying to teach the king about how artistry is worth more than brute strength, which is apparently only a lesson you can learn once you've killed a bunch of people. But really, it's just him trying to hype himself up. And then it's like if some dude like was like, only a guy with a huge dingle-donger could fit this whole cupcake in his mouth. And then he shoves a whole cupcake in his mouth. And everyone like rolls their eyes. They're like, whatever. But he like bragged about it to prove that he has this huge dingle-donger. So that's like what Merlin comes off to me in this story is like this asshole bro that has this ability that no one else has, but no one else really cares about. It's not exactly the same thing, but I think you kind of get what I'm going for. Merlin's probably alive today and is listening to that show and is like, I'm going to turn that asshole into a frog.
Oh my God.
Thanks for listening, Merlin. We appreciate it. So that's one theory. And honestly, I'm pretty sure that that's the truth. But why not explore the other options? One story states that there was an old Irish woman. I love this story. Okay, so I changed up the details a little bit. Like 98% of the story is true. Obviously, my dialogue is nonsense. But one story states that there was an old Irish woman who, for some reason, had in her possession a bunch of giant rocks. Spoilers, yes, those rocks. Obviously, this takes place in Ireland because she's Irish. One day...
Is it like a big one, like the one that she touches in Outlander that
No,
takes her back in time?
She has all the rocks for Stonehenge, just like on her property or something.
What?
Like they're just there. And then one day, a random man shows up and asks if he could buy said rocks. Super interested in the rocks. And she considers this and asks him how much. The man, of course, has a special offer in mind. It wouldn't be much of a store if he was just like, this amount. She was like, deal. So he says, I'm going to start moving the stones. And once I start, you can start counting these gold coins. And he takes out this giant bag filled with gold coins. And he tells her, for each one you count, while I'm moving the stones, you can keep that coin. The old woman says, deal. Like, let's get started, ready, set, go. And she, like, reaches her hand in the bag to start counting coins. And as soon as she says deal, the man snaps his fingers and the rocks vanish. Where do they go? You guessed it, the Salisbury Plain in England. That's where they were teleported to, which is where they are right now. And the old lady, all she knew is that her rocks were gone and she hadn't counted a single coin yet. And the man leaned forward with class and distinction and says, yoink, and retrieves his coins and walks away. And the old woman is pissed. Like, the man starts walking away. She's just sitting there seething with anger.
I mean, that guy's kind of a dick.
Obviously. And she yells at the man, hey! And he stops. And he turns around because he's pretty far away and she's yelling from pretty far distance. And he waits. And she yells out, fuck you! And he, of course, starts laughing. Because, I mean, he got the better end of the deal, obviously. And that only made her more angry. So she doubled down. And she yells, I hope you burn in hell! And the man laughed even harder. And then he eventually calms down a bit and he says, that's so funny. And then he snaps again. And suddenly he's nose to nose with her and he says, because I am the devil. And he was. It was the devil that did this to her. That's the story, is that the devil did this to her. I hid his identity. And the story I read, they tell you in the beginning, I was like, you're just like exposing this way too fast. Which is funny because you were watching Lucifer the entire time we were writing our fucking scripts. And I was like,
I finally got to season 4.
I was like, that is something that character would do. That is so him. Oh my God. So that's another story. And again, the hyper-realism of the story makes it hard to differentiate fact from fiction. If I had to pick, I'd probably go with the radiocarbon dating thing to figure out the origins of this. And it probably is there to give us a more accurate date of when Merlin and Uther showed up, took control of the stones, then pretended to be an old lady, probably stacked on top of each other with like a trench coat over them. And then they tricked the devil into teleporting the stones for them, which is just genius. And I'm pretty sure that's what actually happened. Also, giants. But seriously, like, Stonehenge is this very, very bizarre place. And aside from the near millennia of cremation berries and the 4 other millennia of rituals and God knows what else, I decided to take a look at some of the rumors that came from more recently. So, like, there's all these legends about what happened before, and I think people are more interested in hearing about, like, crazy stories if they've been around for a while. So it's like, what are the crazy stories from Stonehenge today? Because there's a lot of crazy people out there still, and Stonehenge is more visited now than it's ever been.
Really?
Sure enough, I found some crazy stories from people on the internet, because that's what the internet's good for. So take this with a grain of salt. These are most likely bullshit, but hey, maybe one of them's real. The first one is a story about a man who was flying a kite. This is recent memory, recent times. They didn't give me an exact date. Sounds like the 1900s.
Sounds fake.
So obviously. So he's flying a kite. He drove his truck up to this hill, right? He goes and stands in the bed of his truck, which is a weird detail that makes me think it's real.
What? No, but why would you be flying your kite in the bed of your truck?
Just stand in the bed of his truck. He probably had his kite back there. He took it out, let the wind catch it. We're standing in the bed of the truck and the wind's kicking up and it's pulling his kite further and further. And unbeknownst to him, it's pulling it closer to the threshold of the ring around Stonehenge. When it crosses that invisible line, he feels something in his hands that begins to really hurt. And it starts spreading up his arms until he eventually falls unconscious. And he falls out of the bed of his truck. And it's stated that it took him 6 months to recover from whatever ailment struck him while he was flying his kite. So 100% obviously
Was he
real.
like paralyzed for 6 months?
No idea. It's probably fake. This is what I found on the internet, though. So that's the first one. I'm obviously not going to lead with my strongest story.
Okay.
But it's not bad. So that said, there's a group of folks who are visiting Stonehenge who claim to have heard a bizarre buzzing coming from the monument. And I searched around to see if any other folks have experienced this, and I heard there are weird sounds that people think they hear coming from Stonehenge when they're there.
Could it possibly be, I don't know, the magnetism of the earth with the rocks and it just kind of like vibrates because of the...
Maybe.
I don't know.
It could be anything, but people think that they hear stuff. But in this particular case, it was a group of people that stated that they heard this bizarre buzzing and they left. They were smart enough to know that they should just leave, right? After they left, they swore what they heard was that noise being shot into the air, as if whatever it was lifting up. And when they looked up, they saw a huge wheel of fire rotating as it rose higher and higher into the sky. Just this spinning wheel of fire that erupted from Stonehenge. And it freaked them all out, and they all just left. They got in their cars, they got out of there as soon as they could, and upon returning to their home, they claim they saw what they described as a woman dressed in yellow clothes with long hair dressed in this elaborate style that appeared Egyptian. And something about her made them feel like what they had witnessed was a battle between good and evil. Sounds very Fifth Element to me.
Yeah.
They don't state what happens after they see this woman. I'm pretty sure they lived with her and it became a sitcom type of scenario, like Three's Company.
Gosh.
But there's no exact details beyond the end of it, which is just like, and we saw someone who looked Egyptian, and then we realized we saw a battle between good and evil. So these stories aren't really as good as the whole
fictional.
Uther Pendragon ones or the devil showing up. These ones are not as well thought out. But it's not my last one. And this is one that I saw repeated in multiple spots on the internet, and it's kind of creepy. I can't find anything to confirm this. However, it is a bit more specific. So there's a rumor that in the late 1950s, and most sites said 1957, two different factions within the English military held what is known as a war game. Some of you may have heard of this. It's when friendly forces basically align in combat formations. They don't do live fire exercises, but they do things to outwit each other and play out actual battle scenarios.
That's where, like, he hacks the system with the phone, right?
That fucking movie is so good, dude. You can watch it. It doesn't hold up as well anymore because things are so much different. But War Games with Matthew Broderick in the 80s is fucking awesome. I love that movie. So anyways, 1957, two factions within the military competing against one another. One of the sides was allotted 5 tanks. They even have the exact tank. I didn't write it down. For those of you who are tank enthusiasts, I apologize. Picture your favorite tank, though. So one side is allotted 5 tanks to position throughout a specific range of land where this game would be held. One of those tanks was situated extremely close to Stonehenge. Interesting fact, this part is true. Stonehenge does have military zones around it, nearly surrounding it.
Why?
It's just where it's placed, like they've decided to segment out almost all the area around it to be military zones. In some case, testing zones. And I saw signs where they have these things put up, and it's like, there are unused mines here. Like, if you cross this fence, you're probably gonna die. And I was like, that's a really good way to keep people out. But with all the rumors about weird stuff happening in Stonehenge, it's basically like you're only allowed to go to it the way we tell you and when we tell you. And when we decide to close Stonehenge, because they do like shut it down for the night or whatever, like if you try and sneak in, you can only go in through the one way. And any other way you try and approach it, apparently you have to go through the military zone, which is crazy. So the story says that the night the war game was held, one tank, guess which one? Yes, the one close to Stonehenge. Reported seeing a long silver object in the sky, roughly the shape of a cigar, but as far as size, it was supposedly enormous.
Like a UFO?
A UFO.
Okay.
Literally an unidentified flying object. And the soldiers in the tank were panicked, and they prepared to fire live rounds on the target.
Wow.
Because they didn't know what it was. They just thought it wasn't of this earth, and it was a threat. And they were basically trying to radio in for permission and backup to figure out what the hell they were supposed to do. And then suddenly there were no more transmissions from the tank or its inhabitants. And the tank and its inhabitants were never seen again.
What?
They just vanished.
No way. They stole that tank and went off somewhere.
The war game, you'd find it though. The war game basically converted into a search party. They never found them. They don't know what happened. And because of that, they basically buried the story.
Well, how do they know they saw something then?
Because there was like a radio transmission and something leaked out from people that were participants in the war game. because they told him, like, go find these people and tell me if you see a giant cigar floating in the fucking sky. And, like, it just leaked out. But realistically, it could be complete nonsense. It could be all made up. But it's really creepy. And some of the details about the fact that, like, it is surrounded by military zones. And it's, like, 1957, like, during the Cold War, where they're, like, right there. And, like, World War II is still fresh in their minds. Like, they would be defending against certain things. Seeing something in the sky after having, like, the raids that happened during World War II would definitely freak out people who remembered it. This one, I mean, I'm not saying it rings true because obviously it's probably fake, but this one I think holds more credence than obviously the other two with flying the kite or the Egyptian woman.
Is it on a ley line or a little bunch of ley lines?
A whole bunch of stuff about ley lines and how they work with Stonehenge, and that's where like magical energies come from and how things can be used as like portals, but there's nothing that's like substantial or documented or any of that stuff. So I was like, not going to dig too deep into this because it's basically like the snake eating its own tail of like bullshit feeding into bullshit.
It's not possible that aliens built the Stonehenge we see now, right?
There is a lot of stuff about that Stonehenge is specifically there to hide unidentified flying objects, and that there was even one thing that said that the stones themselves were aliens.
What?
And I was like, I'm getting too far into the deep web. I'm about to dip into the dark web. I think I might want to reel myself back in. Because there's so much stuff about Stonehenge. I mean, we're at like 45 minutes right now just from topic one.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, I don't want to take the entire episode to myself because there is more. And I'm sure we'll come back around to Stonehenge when more stuff comes out. But like, there's so much rumor and history and science involved with Stonehenge. It's just fascinating. So
cool.
What do we make from all this? Well, it's clear that Stonehenge has been around for a long time. Like a long, long time. And for just as long as it's been around, people have basically been trying to figure out why it's there. And even though like the 3000 BC era, it started to become a burial site, and even 5,000 years before that, it was something else. The only thing we really know about it is that it seems ritualistic in nature because it's there. Why would people have it there unless it was ritualistic in nature? And more than that, and more than what is it there for, I'm most curious about my first question. Why is it there? What's so special about that spot that it keeps drawing people back to it for 10,000 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a very small portion of land, but it's been so important for so long. And even now it's surrounded by the military and people love to go to it, and it's still this fascinating spot. And you can claim the star calendar idea, and that's why that thing is there, and they adjusted it for different reasons. But it seems odd that this place would just keep pulling people back to it over and over for different reasons.
You know what it is? It's the veil between us and Hogwarts.
Oh, God, that'd be fucking
That'd
awesome.
be great.
Show me which stone is stone 9 3/4, because I'm going to run the fuck into it until they just let me in out of pity. Like, I will clean the fucking bathrooms. Just let me in.
They have events at King's Cross, and they have a shop that's located right across from what would be platform 9 3/4.
They do.
Yeah.
Imagine writing a short story that turns into a book that eventually turns into something that everyone in the world wants to live in, except for those people who don't like your shit. But realistically, that's awesome. But as far as Stonehenge goes, there's really no way for us to tell what it is. All we can really do is pay attention to and document now what it's used for today. You know, and yes, it's a tourist attraction, but in the future, maybe one day it'll be more than that. So I'm thinking ritualistic summoning at 10,000 patrons, and like we can't be sure about the past, but let's make the future together. Like if all those boners can go to Area 51 and not storm it like they were supposed to, we can all go to Stonehenge. I'm just saying. So that, my friends, is Stonehenge.
Nice.
I hope you enjoyed it. I know there's a lot more I could go into, but realistically, this one was almost an hour alone for me.
That's why I had to ask you, like, what about the ley lines? What about the aliens?
There's so much stuff in there.
There's so much theory.
I'm going to wait till we do stuff specifically on ley lines or on specific alien encounters that overlap with Stonehenge.
All right.
Rather than just focus on that one aspect of it. I was like, I want to do history. I want to do the rumors from the fucking 1100s and then rumors from today. And that wound up being 6 pages. And I was like, damn, okay.
If any of you folks out there, though, went to Area 51, please let us know. We're so curious. Send us pictures. That's great.
Likewise, if any of you folks out there have been to Stonehenge, let us know what it was like, because I really do want to go. I've heard from multiple people that have been there that it's boring.
That's the thing when it comes to going to these places like the Grand Canyon.
It's a big hole in the ground.
Exactly. You get
Or
to
Niagara
the Grand,
Falls.
right?
It's a bunch of water falling.
But see, with Niagara Falls, at least you go through it and you get wet. It's
Do you
a fun
though?
little
What
ride.
if you just go and you just look at it and you're like, oh yeah, it's nice. I think
don't
any
know.
scenery will get boring, but some scenery just gets boring faster.
I
want to
relive the scene from The Office.
The Office? Oh, that's a really romantic
Yeah.
scene. I want to relive the scene from Bruce Almighty. Back to you, fuckers.
Oh my god. Yeah, I don't know. Like when it comes to these nature things, you get there, there's not a lot to do. You pay all this money for the tour to get there, and then you're done in like half an hour, and there's nothing else to do. You know, I just can't. I can't bring myself to do the nature stuff like that. I have to do something.
That's why to me it's kind of sad that Stonehenge is a tourist trap now, because wouldn't it be more fun to everyone just go and like you get in line and everyone has a spell book and you put a bunch of runes and all the stones and you just keep trying shit until something works or someone disappears. That's way more exciting than everyone just posting selfies next to a bunch of rocks. Because like the rocks are so big, if the selfie's too close, you could be standing against any wall anywhere that's like concrete that's just like really shitty. And they'd be like, is that Stonehenge? But I mean, what we know
Tag
for sure,
Stonehenge.
we got to go there. So there's actually graffiti on the stones.
No.
But it's not the graffiti you would think of. It's like graffiti from like a long time ago where people carved like symbols into it. And they're like, these aren't like runes. These are assholes. Like people from a long time ago that decided to be dicks that just carved shapes and objects, like actual objects that you could find anywhere, into the sides of the rune or into the sides of the stones that have been there for a lot longer than the actual graffiti was. So it's just, there's a lot of fascinating stuff on Stonehenge. But that said, Robin, I think you have another topic for this episode.
This is going to be like a 2-hour long episode. All right. We should just cut it in half and then be like, tune in next week for the other topic.
Nah. We won't do that. I kind of really want to do that because I could definitely use the rest.
I know.
But we're not going to do that.
Oh, that's lame. Fine. Anyway, so I believe that throughout all our listener base, everyone loves a good mystery or conspiracy or something odd like that. And this week, I'm going to bring you the story of the mysterious D.B. Cooper, a man who to this day has not been identified or captured for what he's done. It's crazy.
Now, I don't have a lot of hanging with Mr. Cooper jokes in my portfolio of jokes, but I don't even know if you remember that show.
That show sounds familiar.
I mean, it was like when I was a kid.
The dad that like coached basketball or something?
I think so. And I remember that he like used to be in basketball, and at one point like an actual famous NBA star came on the TV show, made fun of him. Pretty sure it was part of TGIF for a little while. I don't know. I think Garrett's out there. He'll probably fact check me and let me know what hanging with Mr. Cooper was on like the ABC lineup of television shows.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, we're going to get into our little mind space, all right? We're going to get into our mind space of the past. November 24th, 1971, on the eve of Thanksgiving. So, the eve of Thanksgiving that
So, Black
year,
Wednesday, the day everyone goes out and gets hammered.
everything is doused in film noir, suspense, and sepia tones. Okay. A middle-aged man is carrying a black attaché case, approaching the flight counter of the Northwest Orient Airlines at the Portland airport.
What's an attaché case?
It's a briefcase.
Why don't you just say briefcase?
That's just what it said on the internet, okay?
Way to copy and paste, Robin.
I didn't copy paste. I just like the word attaché.
All right, fine. Be that way.
Anyway, back to your mind space. This guy purchases a one-way ticket for $20 to Seattle on flight 305, set to depart at 2:50 p.m.
You sound like an announcement over a PA right now.
20 freaking dollars for a ticket, an airline ticket.
1940 what?
1971.
Oh, yeah, okay. That still, I feel like, translates to around what it would be right now.
Yeah, but $20? I wish I could buy a plane ticket for $20 to Seattle. How cool would that be?
I mean, I would love to buy a plane ticket for $20, but I think if I was paying $20 to go to Seattle, I would be, like, disappointed.
We can't even go to LA for less than $60 or something.
I know, that's so
insane.
Close. That flight is like 50 minutes. Like, you start to rise, and they're like, we're landing. Sorry if you didn't get your drinks, fuckers.
Right. And this flight is normally, I think, a 2-hour flight or something like that. A 2-hour flight for $20. We can't even get an hour flight for $20. Ugh, so jealous. Anyway.
That was like 50 years ago, though, in all fairness.
This man went by the name of Dan Cooper, and what he does once he boards that plane is a thing of legend. I think it's legendary. I don't know. He's such a badass, okay?
He is the pioneer of the Mile High Club.
That would be... Who did that? Who's the first person to do that?
Probably the first person to be a passenger in a plane. As soon as they took off, they're like, I feel like I need to go have sex in that bathroom right now.
Anyway, so he boards the Boeing 727 and takes his seat at the back of the cabin.
Or like a Boeing 727. Okay, I'm done.
Jesus. Some sources say he lit a cigarette and ordered a bourbon and soda.
You could smoke on planes?
Yeah, so fun time period fact. 1971, smoking was not uncommon on planes. Smoking wasn't entirely banned on all flights, both domestic and international, until 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
What a time to be alive. Trapped in a tube filled with smoke 35,000 feet above the ground.
So, fellow passengers described him as possibly being mid-40s, between 5'10" and 6 feet tall. He wore a lightweight black raincoat, loafers, and a dark suit. His outfit was all neatly pressed with a white-collared shirt, a black clip-on tie, and a mother-of-pearl tie pin. So, obviously not a bad-dressed dude, aside from the clip-on tie, because why would he wear a clip-on tie?
Sounds like he's dressed pretty nice for being on an airplane, because nowadays no one dresses like that on an airplane.
Sweats and Uggs.
Yeah, seriously. If you're lucky, you get sweats and Uggs. It's usually sweats and flip-flops. They can kick them off and you can smell their feet the entire flight.
Witnessed someone with their foot on the window the other day.
I know, that was so trashy.
Anyway, so the flight was approximately a third full and left on time as scheduled. And as the story goes, shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to one of the flight attendants, a Florence Schaffner. And Schaffner just thought it was his way of handing his phone number over to her, so she just dropped the note into her purse. So Cooper leans over and whispers to her, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb."
Wow.
Yeah.
And not in my pants.
In neatly printed all caps, a message along the lines of Cooper having a bomb in his briefcase was written on it. And he told her to sit down next to him. Oh, they don't know exactly what was on the note because he took it back from her afterwards.
Smart dude.
Yeah, he's a smart dude. He told her to sit down next to him, and so she did. Schaffner asked to see the bomb, to which he obliged, just enough for her to see 8 red cylinders, a 2x4 setup, so 2 tubes by 4 tubes, attached with a whole bunch of wires that were all red with a large cylindrical battery.
You just cut the red wire. You're good.
Right? Gotta cut them all, though.
Problem solved.
Gotta cut them all.
Wow.
Sorry.
Did Pokemon just creep into your story for a moment there?
Upon closing the case, he continued to state his demands. He wanted $200,000 in negotiable American currency. That is approximately $1,300,000 in today's currency. It's a lot of freaking money.
Still not enough, man. I mean, if you bring a bomb onto a plane, you gotta ask for at least 10 mil. I mean, 1.3, is that what you said?
Yeah, $1.3 million.
It's like he's cutting him a deal. This must have been like Spirit Airlines.
Oh my God, you're so stupid. Apparently, by stating negotiable American currency, he gave away the fact that he wasn't American necessarily, because no one says that. No one says negotiable American currency. You can Google it. I Googled it. It always just brings up the DB Cooper case. And I thought
That's
that was
hilarious.
I was just so confused. This led investigators in the future to believe that he may have been from Canada. Anyway, so
he does seem very polite for a hijacker who would bring a bomb on board, so that kind of makes sense.
So he right, that makes sense, yeah.
Excuse me,
I didn't even put that together.
You should probably read that note. It's like, that's just so sweet.
So he wanted the monies, honeys, but he also wanted a fuel truck in Seattle to refuel the plane upon arrival. And Schaffner went to the pilots to convey the goings-on, and when she returned to Cooper, he had put on some dark sunglasses and...
Get the fuck out of
yeah,
here.
So I just imagine a Thug Life gif of the pixelized, like, sunglasses lowering over his face, you know? Just because...
She's like, where did you get those? He's like, 2019,
oh my
bitch,
gosh,
what's up?
It's so stupid. So not stupid because he got away with it, but whatever.
Well, spoilers, Jesus Christ.
Oh shit, hold on. You should edit that out. Whatever, we're going to get to it. So, The pilot, William Scott, went on to contact the Seattle-Tacoma Airport Air Traffic Control, and they, in turn, contacted the necessary authorities, both local and federal, in attempts to deter any panic among the passengers. There were 36 of them. They were told that their arrival would be delayed due to a minor mechanical difficulty.
So if I ever hear that on an airplane, I know someone has a bomb.
The president...
You slow down, this plane will explode.
I have a speed joke later, dang it!
I fucking stole it.
Okay.
So what you give for spoiling the topic.
So, the president of Northwest Orient, Donald Nyrup, NYROP, authorized payment to the ransom and ordered all employees to cooperate. The plane circled Puget Sound for about 2 hours to allow Seattle police and FBI to get all their ducks in a row. The ransom money was sourced from banks all over the Seattle area. They had 10,000 unmarked $20 bills. So this is a weird but very detailed fact about the money. The bills were all labeled in serial numbers that began with the letter L, which apparently means that they were issued by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco and were printed during the 1963A or 1969 series.
That's easy. I shouldn't say that's easy. That's smart because that'll like help you track the bills. Like I know they like track serial numbers nowadays for ransom if they ever lose the money.
Well, they also made a microfilm or microfiche photo of every single bill.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's what took so long. Like, oh, they're going to run out of gas up there, but hey, we have 9,000 pictures. We need 1,000 more.
So on top of the money, Cooper also requested parachutes. He requested 4 parachutes. He rejected the Air Force Base's offer of military-grade parachutes and instead requested civilian parachutes with manually operated ripcords, which police obtained from a local skydiving school. Super cute.
That guy's like, you're going to bring these back, right? No, probably not. They might have bullet holes in them. Who knows?
As the flight wore on, Schaffner began noticing how familiar Cooper was with the local area. As they flew over Tacoma, he remarked, "That looks like Tacoma down there." He even correctly indicated the amount of time it would take to drive from SeaTac to McChord Air Force Base, which was 20 minutes, if you were curious.
This sounds like a bunch of shit he looked up and he was just like dropping it to throw them off the scent.
Which would make sense, right?
Yeah.
This guy sounds smart. Schaffner and other members of the flight crew noted that he was calm and polite through the entire thing.
Definitely Canadian.
He seemed like an educated, well-spoken man. He was thoughtful and even offered to request meals for the flight crew during their stop in Seattle. This guy ordered a second bourbon and water and even paid his drink tab, attempting to tip Schaffner with the change.
I'm just going to say this, and I don't know if this is controversial or not because he's clearly a criminal, and criminals are typically bad people, but this guy exudes confidence, politeness, and big dick energy, and I'm just into this story, man.
Well, like, the whole tipping the flight attendant with the change, it just sounds like a sexual innuendo, and can you think of any other random innocuous act that just isn't overtly pervy,
what
but
I would
is
have
pervy?
loved is if he got caught because at the end he actually gave her his phone number. He was like,
Oh,
"Since that's what you
that'd
wanted
be
anyways."
super romantic.
Wink.
At 5:24 p.m., Cooper was informed that all his demands were set and ready to go, so they got all that stuff together in a little more than 2.5 hours. So, I mean, that's pretty fast
That
for
is
taking
pretty good work.
$10,000 bill photos, you know?
Maybe they just had him ready to go just in case someone demanded that exact amount of money.
Well, that's true. I mean, yeah, it's
No.
the I mean,
They
but
didn't have that
Okay,
ready.
shut up. You're stupid. I hate you. All right, so at 5:39, they landed the plane in Seattle, and Cooper instructed the pilot to taxi to an isolated but brightly lit area of the airport. He had everyone close all the window shades in the cabin to deter snipers, which is super, super smart. Al Lee, the Northwest Orient's Seattle operations manager, approached the plane in street clothes to deliver the cash and the parachutes. After the delivery, Cooper ordered all the passengers off, as well as Schaffner and the senior flight attendant, Alice Hancock. Once they were all off, Cooper then outlined his flight plan to the rest of the crew that was remaining on the plane. This guy had so many demands. He was absolutely meticulous. This guy was super smart.
He knew his shit.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what he was going to do.
So what he wanted to do was go southeast towards Mexico City at a max altitude of 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters and as slow as possible without stalling, which is about 100 knots or 115 miles per hour. So that's,
I've driven faster than that.
Right.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah. The landing gears were to stay deployed throughout the entire flight with the wing flaps lowered to a very specific 15 degrees, and the cabin was to remain unpressurized.
Do you think at some point, I'm not saying all of them, but some of them might have kind of been rooting for this dude to get away with this shit? Like, I can see him giving these instructions and they're like, fuck it, we're going to do what he says, just see what happens.
The pilot discussed with Cooper the necessity for another refueling stop before Mexico, agreeing on Reno, Nevada, which is pretty cool. I mean, they were like, hey, we know you want to do this, but we got to make another stop. Can we stop at Reno? That's great. Let's do this.
It's like, sure, Reno sounds great. You got it.
The plane's refuel understandably took a while, and I'm sure they wanted to stall for as long as possible. The FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, requested a face-to-face meeting with Cooper, which he denied, understandably. He was like, no way, why would I want to see you guys? The first refueling truck supposedly had a vapor lock in the pumping mechanism, causing Cooper to become suspicious. And I would totally be suspicious too, because don't they all have vapor locks? Like how cars have the vapor locks now when you pump your gas, where they don't want all the fumes to be coming out or something like that. So I would totally be suspicious too. I'm sure he was like, this is bullshit. I mean, he's the bad guy, but the feds should think of a better excuse. They're smarter than that.
Right.
A second tank came by, and then a third after the second went dry. And I don't know much about planes, but I feel like they were definitely stalling and making stuff up.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, and that's where I brought up, kind of reminds me of Keanu Reeves' hit movie Speed. Because they do have to refuel the bus at some point, right?
They do.
Yeah.
I think. No, yes, no, maybe.
I'm pretty sure they have to refuel the bus at some point.
I don't think so. I don't think I ever refueled the bus.
Well, because someone cuts the fuel line and then the fuel's spilling everywhere.
Well, they say they're going to refuel the bus, but what they really do is they bring the other bus next to it to get the people off. So if you've not seen Speed, what have you been doing with your fucking life? Sorry about spoiling it, but that movie's amazing.
It's
By
so
the way,
good.
That's not the end of the movie. You should go watch it again. I fucking love Speed.
I love Speed. They
bum 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 bum.
The music is so good.
Bum, bum,
Anyway,
bum, bum,
okay, that's for a different podcast.
Right. If that ever happens.
So they kept the back exit door open and stairs extended, and Cooper ordered for takeoff. But the airline stated that it would be unsafe to take off in those conditions. They're like, there's no way you can have those stairs extended. Cooper didn't agree, but decided he'd just drop the stairs mid-flight. So he wasn't worried about it. He's like, whatever, fine.
Not going to split hairs. He's like, I'm getting away with this shit.
Yeah. At about...
Robin already said so.
Shut up. At about 7:40 p.m., they took off with 5 people on board. So Cooper himself, the pilot Scott, the flight attendant Tina Mucklow, co-pilot Ratazak, and their flight engineer H.E. Anderson. So there was 5 people, including Cooper.
I'm so tired. I was so expecting that guy's name to be H.E. double hockey sticks.
Oh my God. So there were 2 F-106 fighter jets that were sent to follow the plane. One followed above and one below out of Cooper's view, so we couldn't see them. There were 5 aircraft, including those 2 fighter jets, attempted to follow the plane, and none of them saw what happened next. So after takeoff, Cooper told the crew to hang in the cockpit and remain there with the door closed. Mucklow noticed, before they went into the cockpit, noticed that he was trying to tie something around his waist. At 8 p.m., a warning light flashed in the cockpit indicating that the air stairs, or like on the 727, there's a set of stairs all the way at the back on the bottom of the tail that flaps open. Kind of like those airplanes that you see people jumping out of.
Go, 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 go,
yeah,
go. That one? Okay.
Yeah.
That's their official name. I don't know if you know that.
The go, 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 go. Yep. Okay, so there was a warning light saying that the stairs were being used. The crew offered to assist, but Cooper declined the offer, which I thought was really funny because this crew's totally like rooting for him. Like, yeah, you get it, grr.
Or maybe they're just like really, really good flight crew. They're like, well, we got to help them with everything.
The crew noticed an air pressure change, meaning that the door was opened. At about 8:13, the tail of the plane experienced sudden upward movement requiring piloted correction. So it totally jumped, At 10:15, the plane landed at Reno Airport where the stairs were still deployed and FBI and local authorities surrounded the aircraft. Cooper was nowhere to be found because that guy a ninja. And which is okay. I know it's horrible to be like, yeah, you go, but it's kind of fucking cool.
I mean, he stole money from a very specific person that I don't know anything about. It's the person who owns this airline,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, and then aside from that, he kind of did put people's lives in danger, but to the minimal amount that he possibly could. And then he just vanished like a fart in the wind when he opened the back end of that
wasn't
plane.
Real, I don't think, right?
I don't know. You're the one telling the story,
because
dude.
you never hear about the bomb ever again. Okay.
That's kind of hilarious.
He shows the bomb to this flight attendant, and then you never hear anything about the bomb ever again. So I'm just wondering if he obviously must have taken it with him or something. Anyway, so agents discovered 66 unidentified latent fingerprints. They also found Cooper's tie and tie clip and 2 of the 4 provided parachutes. They did find some DNA on his tie and tie clip, but it didn't really lead anywhere. So, unfortunately. But
can they 23andMe that shit nowadays and see who he's related to?
That'd be so smart.
Just saying.
Oh, shit. That's genius.
Now, I'm starting to realize that I think I have heard this story before, but not in this much amazing, vivid detail. So first and foremost, I know we got a lot to go. Thank you. This is awesome.
Okay.
But are we going to speculate on his identity in this story in the future?
We'll get there.
Then I'll keep my mouth shut.
Okay. So they found his tie clip, 2 of the 4 provided parachutes, 1 of which had been opened, and 2 of its lines had been cut from the canopy, which is the big billowy part of the parachute, if you guys didn't know. That does all the life-saving things when you're falling. It's suspected to have been used to tie the money bag shut or secure it to his body, and that was possibly what that flight attendant saw he was doing, wrapping the thing around his waist. I just don't understand why he left his tie and his tie clip. So you
don't want that flapping in your face while you're skydiving.
Yeah, but then you look cool, like Mission Impossible type stuff.
You know what looks cooler? Taking off your tie and then like unbuttoning that top button. Yeah.
What? I don't know.
Going from business to business cash while you skydive.
Witnesses were interviewed in Portland, Seattle, and Reno, resulting in a few composite sketches, which we'll post a whole bunch of pictures on our Instagram later. Authorities had over 800 possible suspects. How they possibly came up with that many, I couldn't tell you.
I bet you it's all the shit he left behind. Like, they all pointed in a different direction and just kept expanding, like, the suspect pool.
Maybe. Quite possibly.
That's what I would do. I wasn't alive then. It wasn't me.
Okay. So the whole D.B. Cooper thing is actually kind of funny. Because he only went by Dan Cooper the entire time, right? So there was a man in Oregon named D.B. Cooper who had a minor police record. So unfortunately for him, the authorities looked into him. He was ruled out as a suspect, but the news had already published his name in a whole bunch of different media outlets. So his name was out there. And it kind of stuck. So instead of this Dan Cooper person, they're just like, it's D.B. Cooper. That's his name now.
It's like the guy who did this was like, wow, these people are idiots.
So trying to search any exact particular area wasn't really an easy thing to do. He could have gone pretty huge distances in a whole bunch of different directions, especially because he had the manually controlled paracords too. He really could have floated anywhere.
Right.
There was no way to pinpoint an exact landing point. What boggled the surrounding fighter pilots is that they never saw a thing. They saw no one exit. They didn't see any parachute open. Nothing appeared on their radar. Supposedly, a person dressed in black in the middle of the night could have easily been missed, though. So, because he had the jacket and all that fun stuff.
Or he stayed on the plane. That's why he had everyone go into that room so he could, like, he knew some part of that plane that
But
he
when
could
the-
stow away in.
When the FBI searched the plane, they couldn't find anything.
Because he's good, man.
Nah.
He's obviously good.
FBI did an experiment pushing a 200-pound sled out the back of the open air stair that reproduced the same tail motion, which led authorities to pinpoint the jump time at 8:13 when the crew felt that whole thing happen. And when they did that, they're like, okay, we're going to calculate this from that time and where they were at that time and then go around the areas there. They placed the possible landing zone in an area in the southernmost region of Mount St. Helens. They focused on Clark and Cowlitz counties. Authorities from the area searched the mountain wilderness on foot and by helicopter. This whole search was insane. They went door to door, homes and farms. They even had patrol boats along the lakes. They were sparing no expense to find this dude that stole $200,000. There were no clues as to Cooper's possible whereabouts. Further investigating and research indicated that their original landing zone was totally wrong. Data compiled from the pilot and the surrounding aircraft, they all agreed that the original calculations were incorrect because they were further east than they thought. And why they never came up with that information in the beginning is beyond me. They wasted all this time searching in the wrong
spot the entire time.
And so, it's just
they
so
basically
annoying.
would have been lucky to catch him because of the mistakes that they made.
FBI are thought to believe that Cooper never even survived the jump. And if he did, there would be no way he survived the trek out of the wilderness because it was in the middle of winter and all he had on was that nicely pressed suit without his tie even. So his shirt's hanging open at the top.
Yeah, that tie would have saved his life for sure. He probably would have choked a bear out with it with his bare fucking hands.
Some theorists believe he actually worked for the airline, speculating that it was an inside job and that he never actually existed, which kind of works because no one ever really had to see him face to face except for the flight attendants.
So they think it's just this crew?
Yeah, so
this crew just plotted this shit together. Like, let's just go for some joyrides.
No, like they worked for the company. So they worked for the company. The company hired this guy to do it, or it was just an employee of the company that did it. And the insurance paid them out for this money.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Why would you only do it for $200,000?
So that's the whole conspiracy idea, is that this company was like, insurance is going to pay us out and whatever. Anyway, the investigation was ridiculously extensive. They even went back after the snow melt the next year to try to find some more clues. But some say that the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980 destroyed any further possible remaining evidence that could have existed.
This dude's either a psychic or a time traveler. He knew exactly how to cover his tracks.
It's in this, oh my gosh.
Oh my God. What if, like, the butterfly effect? What if he is a time traveler and the butterfly effect caused Mount St. Helens to erupt?
Wow. I don't think
we're getting deep in the paint now.
Okay.
We're way down that wormhole.
What's that even mean, deep in the paint?
It's a basketball term.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the FBI put out the serial numbers of the ransom bills to different financial institutions, casinos, etc., all those different places that could possibly handle all this money, in hopes of having these dollar bills come up somehow. People definitely took advantage of the fact that they released all these serial numbers to try to make their own monies. And
oh my God, what is wrong with people?
There was one pair of guys that made a whole bunch of counterfeit bills and got like $30,000 through this one news outlet. So this news outlet paid them $30,000 to get an interview with the hijacker. It was so much dumb stuff. Oh my God.
They probably all asked themselves, what would DB Cooper do?
So
he would
smart.
defraud the shit out of everyone.
Anyway, so the real money has never turned up. It's still missing. Various entities put out rewards for any discovered bills, none of which were ever claimed. There was an instance, however, in February of 1980, where an 8-year-old Brian Ingram, vacationing with his family on the Columbia River, about 9 miles downstream from Vancouver, Washington, and 20 miles southwest of Ariel, this kid discovered 3 packets of this ransom money. So 2 packets of $120 bills, And then the third packet was 90 $20 bills. So this one was missing 10 bills for some reason, which is really strange. They were all still wrapped in rubber bands and in the same order that they were given to Cooper, which means they were never mixed up or taken out or counted or whatever. But it was just in far worse shape. You could say they were a little crispy.
Oh, I hate you. I thought we were going to get through an episode without you saying it.
And you know what? It was 1980. Did Mount St. Helens go off yet?
I'm pretty sure 1980 or 1981 was when Mount St. Helens
This
went
is
off.
February 1980. Maybe not yet. I don't know. But some bills were burnt for sure. And I sent you a picture so you can post that on Instagram later. The discovery of this money seems odd as they showed up so long after the hijacking, and it's hard to see only 3 of the bundles showing up together. Why would just these 3 show up? You know what I mean? And then there's the one bundle that's missing 10 bills. It's just the most random thing.
Mount St. Helens was May 18th, 1980. So right before.
Yeah. So that's not what made the bills crispy. Anyway.
He burnt them for warmth.
So here are just a few of the suspects that they had. There are a whole bunch of really good ones, but I did like one big one, a couple little ones.
I have heard one theory on who this fucking guy is. So if you don't have it in your script, I really hope you don't, so I can bring mine up and hopefully blow your mind.
Okay. So there was a Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., who was an Army veteran, served 2 tours in Vietnam. He was a demolition expert and a helicopter pilot. On April 7th, 1972, he staged one of the large number of hijackings that followed Cooper. So people just copycatted this dude so hardcore, trying to hijack all these planes.
People idolize criminals.
It's insane, okay? He used a fake hand grenade, like an object that looked like a hand grenade. He had an unloaded gun, and he demanded 4 parachutes, just like Cooper did, and $500,000. And after receiving the money, he went back up in the air and jumped out over Utah. But this guy was not as smart as Cooper was, because he left a magazine with fingerprints all over it.
And it turns out he used an avocado as a grenade and a super soaker as a gun.
He also left a handwritten note that they were able to compare to his military records, confirming his identity.
Don't leave shit behind.
He was arrested with cash in hand and received 45 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's a long time for stealing that much money. He escaped from jail, but was tracked down and killed in a shootout 3 months later.
Holy shit.
Yeah, he got shot down by the FBI, which is insane. McCoy never admitted or denied being Cooper the whole time.
Why would you do it again if you got away with it, though?
Because maybe he did it for the thrill of the chase. I don't know.
But then you'd admit that it was you just coming back again, like Speed 2, the speedening.
Oh my god. What is Speed 2 called anyway?
Cruise Control.
Oh my god.
Never seen it. Refused to watch it.
I've seen Cruise Control. Spoilers. Okay, this movie is old. If you haven't seen it, I'm just going to tell you. The ship ends up going all the way to the shore and crashing through the entire harbor and everything, and almost gets to this building, and it stops right before crashing into the building. It's so stupid.
I will still not watch it. I support Sandy B and her movies, but
there's
I'm
no
not
Kukanu
watching
in it.
that movie. I know. No Kukanu. Not watching it.
Anyway, so next person. Robert Rackstraw. So, admittedly, he kind of looks like Cooper.
He sounds like a criminal, too.
Yeah, kind of. I also sent you a picture of him. You can post later. So, admittedly, he kind of looks like Cooper. He actually died in July of this year. So, he just died. He was a retired pilot and ex-convict who served during the Vietnam War. I think there's a theme going on here. He became suspect when he was arrested in Iran for possession of explosives and check kiting/check fraud. He was released on bail only to attempt to fake his own death. So what he did was he rented a plane and he called Mayday, saying he was bailing out of the plane over Monterey Bay. And he ended up later getting arrested for forging pilot certificates. And the plane that he said he was bailing from was repainted and just hanging out in a nearby hangar. So he stole this plane and did. It's just, this guy is insane. But the main.
Sounds like he almost got away with it, though, if it wasn't for those snooping kids.
The main reason why he was a suspect was his resemblance, really. But those flight attendants that saw him for themselves say that they looked nothing alike. So it just kind of depends, and we'll post that so you guys can make your own opinion. Then there was Kenneth Christensen. And in 2003, Lyle Christensen was watching a documentary on Cooper and was convinced that it was his brother, Kenneth. And he tried to convince the FBI. He even contacted a PI or a private investigator. Kenneth Christensen was enlisted in the Army in 1944 and trained as a paratrooper. Hello, paratrooper.
I was going to say, one of these folks is going to have paratrooper experience.
He joined the Northwest Orient, so he joined that freaking airline in 1954 as a mechanic in the South Pacific. He then became a flight attendant. He was 45 at the time of the hijacking, but was smaller than eyewitness testimonies. He did smoke and enjoyed bourbon himself.
But who doesn't?
Also left-handed like Cooper. So
that is intriguing.
The way that they told that they could tell that Cooper was left-handed was how his tie clip was clipped onto his tie. So it wasn't coming from the right side, it was coming from the left side.
Someone that meticulous in detail, I wonder if they would miss that or deliberately do that. I was thinking based off of how this investigation was handled, you're going to say, and they knew he was left-handed because he kept saying out loud, I'm left-handed. They're like, we think he may be left-handed.
So Schaffner, that flight attendant, also told reporters that Christensen looked the most like D.B. Cooper of all the suspects she'd been shown. So this guy looks the most like who she says she saw. Supposedly, Christensen had purchased a house in cash a few months after the hijacking.
That's suspicious.
Which is suspicious. He died of cancer in 1994. While dying, he told his brother, "This is something you should know, but I cannot tell you." Which is totes suspicious, just saying. Upon his death, his family discovered gold coins and valuable stamp collection, as well as over $200,000 in different bank accounts. They also found a folder of Northwest Orient news clippings dating to when he was hired in the 1950s. But what's strange is that the clippings stopped right before the hijacking. So they stopped right before the hijacking, despite it being the biggest bit of news about that airline ever.
Maybe he was just proud of their success and didn't want to take part in documenting their failure.
Maybe. He continued to work for the airline years after 1971, but never ever clipped any other news articles about them. Well, it's kind of weird.
That's bizarre.
Here's a bummer, though, when it comes to this whole idea that he's the one that did it. Internet detectives, these internet sleuths out there, found that Christensen didn't actually buy the house in cash. He had a mortgage that took 17 years to pay off. So he didn't actually do it. He also sold almost 2 acres of land for $17,000 per acre to account for his large amounts of money in the bank. So he was ruled out because those kind of things.
Because there was an actual way to trace the money.
But who knows? I mean, he still could have done it just for the thrill.
So what was he trying to confess in his deathbed then?
I don't know. There could have been a million different things. Family drama, who knows? On July 8th, 2016, the FBI suspended their investigation of the Cooper case. That's 3 years ago. So they
were investigating this shit for a very long time.
For a very long time. The 60-volume case is said to be preserved for historical purposes at the FBI headquarters in D.C.
Please read this case study and learn how to completely fuck up an investigation.
Or how to not fuck up. Like, they messed up. Please don't do these things. Be a better agent. You can actually find a 28-part packet of evidence on the FBI website. So you can read all that stuff if you want to.
Is there a reward? Because I might check it out if there's a reward.
You're crazy. There were only rewards like right after, the years after. Anyway, after this incident, there were a number of hijackings that definitely would have been impossible in this day and age. And I say that, but there were 15 that were similar to Cooper's, none of which were successful. So I guess not in that day and age either. I mean, I don't know how people expect to hijack planes, dude.
I feel like this was back in the day when hijackings weren't as nefarious as they became during 9/11.
Yeah.
When everyone used to have a good time with hijackings.
Shut up. You're so dumb. Okay, anyway, this began the age of more secure commercial travel. In 1973, the FAA began requiring airlines to search all passengers and their bags. There were a bunch of issues. There were lawsuits and stuff like that saying that it was illegal or unlawful to search everyone, stuff like that. So that's when they narrowed it down to weapons and that kind of stuff. In 1972, all Boeing 727 aircraft were fitted with a device dubbed the Cooper vane, which I thought was really cool.
That's funny.
That prevented the lowering of the back air stair during flight. I just can't believe it's named after this dude. Peepholes were also installed on all cockpit doors so that the crew could observe the passenger cabin so that they could watch whatever they're doing because they had no idea what Cooper did while he was in there, you know? Fun Nevada fact. The hijacked 727 changed hands through a number of different airlines, but eventually landed into the hands of the Air Force's civilian charter fleet to transport workers. So this plane went between Nellis Air Force Base out here in Vegas to the Tonopah test site during the Nighthawk development program. Well, I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, what? It ended up here in Nevada? Shut up. Sadly, though, its life ended up scrapped for parts in Memphis.
That's a bummer.
So I thought that was it's a really interesting mystery to me.
No, I totally agree. And here's the thing. The first time I heard about this, I didn't remember the name D.B. Cooper because what I did remember is that they were saying Tommy Wiseau, the guy who made the movie The Room, which is the movie The Disaster Artist is about. Because it's like this movie that's famous for how bad it is.
Okay.
They say that he was D.B. Cooper.
How?
And like there's these weird things that connect where, and I'm looking it up right now about how like the movie wound up being financed for almost the exact amount of money that he demanded. And he actually like looks like him, a bunch of crazy shit. Because Wiseau, like he financed that movie The Room by himself and no one knows where he got the money from. Plus he says he's from like New Orleans and he was born in 1969, but they've proved that Tommy Wiseau's not from New Orleans and he wasn't born in 1969. And he has this really weird accent that sounds Eastern European.
Yeah.
And he also says things that aren't like American style. So like he has phrases that he works in that people are like, that's not something that you would say if you're a natural born American, like negotiable American currency, perhaps. And he's, 5'9", which is around the height of D.B. Cooper, and he supposedly looks like him. And he supposedly showed up in Hollywood, like, right around the time this fucking thing took place. It's a fun theory. It's probably not true. I know that the theory didn't start until, like, 2014. And it was way after The Room came out. I feel like people decided that they kind of wanted to, like, really lean into it for fun. But, like, I don't know. That was the one I remember hearing about, but I couldn't remember those D.B. Cooper. But I hope D.B. Cooper is listening to this and he's like, yeah, fuck you guys.
Well, how old would he be now? Because it was, if he was, he'd be like 90.
You're just assuming he was 40, though. People just think he was 40. Maybe he was just a very weathered 20-year-old. In which case, he's more like 70 now.
I bet he's around 90.
You don't know.
Or he's probably
dead.
He probably lived a good life with his $200K and was like, I'm good.
You know what that note really said? It said, like, if you help me, I won't hurt you, and I'll give you some motherfucking dollar bills, y'all. And that's why he's like, I'll tell you everything to do. Well, you guys aren't going to get in trouble, and I'll get this money, and then I'll disperse some of it with you. So maybe he wasn't looking for that big fat payday. He was going to give like $10K to each person that helped him out. And that's why they're like, do you want us to help you open up that back hatch?
If $200,000 is $1 million fucking dollars, imagine what 10K is. 10K is probably baller.
Times 5, it'd be around 50K.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
I mean, it would be more than that actually, because if 200,000 was like 1.3 million, then it's like times 6.
I bet you could buy a house for that much back then.
Oh yeah, I'm sure like there was a very specific reason he asked for this amount of money, and maybe he was the Joker and just wanted to watch the world burn to see if he could get away with it. And then he got into the woods, set the money on fire, and just went back to his normal life. But who knows? That's an awesome mystery, though. I really, really enjoyed that one. So
I really enjoyed it too.
Good shit.
Thanks.
Pretty proud of you. You know where he went after that? Stonehenge. All right. This is one of our longer episodes, but it's not the longest episode. But
yeah.
I think it's pretty good, even though you're being mean to me at the beginning of mine and telling me my story was stupid.
It was like that whole chunk in the beginning was so unnecessary. This stupid made-up dream that wasn't even real.
I say it was a fun writing exercise that I hope some folks out there enjoyed. But
that's what you were typing so furiously at the beginning of the night.
I don't know. I blacked out. I told you. I just came to when that story was on the screen. I was like, this is so amazing. Bad. So I hope it painted a nice picture in your brains, though, because we definitely gave your mind's eye a workout this episode 94 of the Scarish Podcast. If any of you are DB Cooper and would like to email us, please email storytime@scarish.com.
If you'd like to share some of your $200,000 with us.
Hopefully you've been saving it to let that inflation kick in. Also, if you have a story that you'd like to send us, you can go to scarish.com, our website, and click on Contact Us, fill that out, or hit up any of our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Robin has a theory. That's her theory face.
What if we got in the mail, we just got one $20 bill
in that sequence of numbers?
I
would shit my pants.
Oh my gosh.
I would go live on YouTube. I wouldn't even show the dollar bill. I would just poop my pants and then end the stream.
Oh man, dude, for real though, that would be.
Now who's making up stupid fucking stories?
I would frame that shit if we got in the mail just one $20 bill of that sequence of numbers.
That's funny.
Holy crap, I would frame that shit.
You can also hit us up facebook.com/scarishpodcast, @scarishpod on Instagram. Or, at ScarishPod on Twitter, @ScarishPodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much to everyone who listened to this episode. We sincerely hope you enjoyed it. Robin, if folks wanted to give us some dollar bills, not of the $20 sequential number variety.
You can send us those if you have some DB Cooper bills. But
if you want to give it to us electronically, how can they do that?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. It's monthly donations, but we do have a whole bunch of different tiers, and we're trying to come up with a whole bunch of new content exclusively for patrons. We do discount codes for our merch. Things like that, so you can head over there. And then you can go to ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. Those are one-time donations, and those go to help us upgrade our studio setup and our little computer here that's rooting away.
Indeed, I have a shopping list getting ready to get this stuff ordered. I have to make sure I get it all at once because some things have like those return dates where if you don't return them right away, if they don't work, you're just stuck with them. I got stuck with a stick of RAM like that the last time I built a computer, but thanks to the folks who have donated.
Expensive.
The RAM that we're getting is expensive because it has to match the motherboard that we're getting, which has to match the processors that we're getting. So if you waste
what are you getting?
You waste like $80 on a stick of RAM, then you're just out that $80, and I don't want to do that with people's money. But thank you to everyone who has donated. We sincerely appreciate it. Please kicking it our way so we can make sure we get a machine that lets us do game nights, which we are super excited about how that went. Thank you to everyone that came out for that. But I think that's just about everything we have for episode 94. It's like 2 a.m. and this episode comes out in 2 hours. So I need to get this thing edited and out to you folks and in your ear holes. So thank you one more time. Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later. Oh, you're a fucking dickhead.